Yes. Sorry, I'll go through the experiments and then I'll go through the results. And now so that was the first experiment, just comparative study of the three interfaces and 3 dimensions and 3 factors within every dimension. Second study, cultural and personality differences. We collected in the first experiment, we collected personality data of these subjects, and we tried to understand if personality is a factor. And extrovert people, for example, trust more things that introvert people don't trust, or anything like that. And then the other aspect of this is the cultural dependency. So we replicated this study 4 times in France, Japan, Russia, and the US, trying to, and when I say replicated, it means like completely. It was translated, it was adapted. For example, thumbnails of the movies sometimes are different in different countries. So adapted as much as possible with native speakers, with piloting, and literally repeating it 4 times again with nearly 110 subjects in every group, in every country, and trying to look at the cultural differences, cultural cliche, if you wish, if we see any repercussions of these cultural cliches in the results that we get. And the third study, which was done just in Japan, before I go to the third study, I have to go back and sort of tell you why we did the third study. If I go back here, we have this humanoid agent or personality. And somebody asked this question, who was this person, a random person? This one, sort of disclosing the results that will come in a minute, this one failed miserably. Completely miserably, across all the countries, across all the dimensions, across all the personality. This one just failed miserably. And that puzzled us, because if you look at recommended systems, they naturally come with this social context, sort of people like you like this item, so you should like it too, right? And here we say people like this item, not like you, but people like this item, and then this is nowhere near trustworthy. Why? Right? And that's why, because this one failed so miserably, we wanted to understand why it failed so miserably. And somebody, again, telling something that will come in half an hour, because this person was nobody and nobody knew him. So that's why it failed miserably. But we wanted to sort of understand why the social aspect failed so badly. And then we conducted this study in Japan, where we looked at, we called it the proponent. So essentially the person that promotes the recommendation, and there were several versions of this proponent. One of them, there was a real life contact, so a real life friend of the user. We recruited groups of users, students within the same university, within the same subject, who knew each other, and then recommendations were based on real faces here. Like we don't show it, but there were real people, real faces promoting the recommendation, like you should follow this recommendation because your friend Christoph really liked this movie, for example, okay? Or there was, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I was told that these are famous TV personalities in Japan who, like this is Liliko, I think. They're very famous in Japan, and they talk about new movies. So in essence, a known established authority in the domain. So she's supposed to know which movies are good, which movies are not so good. So not just a random person, but a friend or a TV personality or a system, AI recommender, right? And that's where we wanted to compare essentially which of the 3, in general, the human proponent failed. The recommendations were not trusted with this random human, but now we try to understand it a bit more and experiment with specific proponents and not just a random person. Okay, so these were the 3 studies. Again, the first one, just a comparison of all these dimensions. I swear I didn't touch it. Yeah. The second one is culture and personality differences, and the third one specifically looking into these proponents. And in this case, in the first 2, we just showed them 3 lists and asked which one you trust most. Here we had an explicit add to cart, which is, okay, you get a list of 10 items, which one you would like to watch, or which ones in plural you'd like to watch. And this is kind of slightly different, slight difference in the design, but the results are still aligned. So, okay, let's skip the details and get to the results. The easy things, that's the first one, just the overall trust. So here you have the dimensions of trust, right? The six dimensions of trust. And here you have the six constructs of trust. I just want to stick to the right terminology. 6 constructs of trust. Here you have three dimensions: presentation, explanation, prioritization. And here you have the 3 factors within every dimension. Now let's start with the easy things. What to include in the list? It's in a different order, but it's the same thing. What to include in the list? What to prioritize? We have a very clear winner. Quality is the preferred dimensions across all the factors of trust. Just a second, okay? So quality is strong. So people say good recommendations. I want high quality items in the recommendation list, and this is what is most trusted with respect to all of them. You see, it's consistent. It's all of them prefer quality. And then for the presentation, again, we have a very clear winner. This organization interface where the items were grouped by genres, that's the most trusted one. Again, consistently across all the factors, this is the most trusted presentation. Grouping by genres is trusted more. So quality items and grouped by genres. I'll stop here, Christoph.
Yeah, but what is the scale? So is it percentage of people or?
Yes. So we have a number of lists shown, which is number of lists, number of subjects times the number of repetitions, and 49 with respect to competence. 49% of people trusted quality over the other 2. Here it will always sum up to 100%. Like every triplet. Yeah, statistically significant, all those very clear. And again, consistently across all the dimensions. So like they clearly show you what they trust more, what they trust less. By the way, look at the human. That's the failed miserably. That's a third study, right? And you'll see even more in different cultures, but you can see like this one like 49, 62, 50, 60, and this is like in the teens. Okay, so human really, like, yeah, we don't trust this one. It's not trusted. Now, the interesting, this is kind of boring because it's very clear. You have one very clear winner, and then it's easy kind of to understand why. With the explanation, we have different winners with respect to different constructs of trust. Okay, I won't go into this because in the paper we really try and analyze this and understand why. But in essence, like just to give you one example, let's see if I can come up with something. Yeah, for example, look at this one. So this is transparency, sort of. I understand the reason for recommendations. And you look at personalized explanation, which was this item is recommended to you because you like blah and blah. Okay, so you can immediately see the dimension. Once you explain me why this item gets recommended, once the recommender is transparent, transparency is the most preferred one. So kind of that's probably the most obvious explanation, and we have slightly deeper discussion for the rest. Another thing that's interesting here, and I would like to highlight, is the overall one, because we have a winner here. This one with the overall trust, IMDb factual explanation is the more trusted one, but it's not a linear combination of the previous 5, right? Because kind of naturally would imagine, yes, there are individual constructs, and then we somehow cognitively put them all together into one number, into one figure. No, that's not exactly the case, because just count. Persuasive is preferred once, personalized explanation is preferred 3 times, IMDb is preferred once, and overall, surprise, surprise, IMDb. So it's probably not a linear combination, not a simple summation or averaging. There is more complex, there is more than that, and we don't really know what, but just wanted to highlight, that apparently personalized explanation, which is preferred with respect to 3 constructs of trust, is actually not the preferred one overall. So probably there are more complex processes that take in place here. We don't know what they are, or at least, we're not the right people to explain them, but clearly something's happening here. Any questions?
Yeah, like 3 independent studies, or this is like 3 independent factors?
Independent factors, that's one study.
Did you test the interaction effect between the factors? Because
no.
That would be interesting to know.
I agree. No, we didn't do it.
So the total number of users is 100 per country, right?
No, that's just the first study, which was one country independent mechanical Turk recruitment of about 120 subjects. Cool. More questions?
How this is presented. So like you have the color code, 3 colors in your user interface, and the way you present information probably also affects trust. Or did you use kind of same style all the way?
Yeah, no, same style all the way. We
Yeah.
didn't distinguish. Essentially, if they really paid attention, they could have probably noticed that, here we have the same items, whereas here we had to show different items because but I doubt, I seriously doubt they. Yeah, again, I speculate, but I don't believe so. We never validated this properly. Yeah, cool. Now the second bit, the second study will go a little faster. Just jumping forward. So yeah. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so what did you learn from this study and what would you do?
Design implications in a few slides. They're coming. Yep. And again, I'll skip those things because we talked about them, so I'll skip more details. Here is the more interesting. Oh no, it's still the cultural differences. In fact, sorry, I did skip something. There were differences with respect to personality. That's something that I skipped. There were differences with respect to personality. Again, some of those differences were able to explain, some of them were not, but let me give you just the more simple things. Let me see. I think the extroversion is easier to explain. You are familiar with extroversion, introversion, right? Sort of open, chatty, social people versus more reserved. Yeah, let's go with reserved. Yeah, trying to pick neutral terms. So this is about the dimension of extroversion, where we have introversion versus extroversion, and extroverts trusted more persuasive explanation, like within the dimension of explanations. Okay, extroverts trusted more persuasive explanations, those kind of that naturally come with more excitements, like 11 Academy Awards out of the 11 nominations, whereas introverts trusted more the IMDb scores. Very natural, right? Because if I'm an introvert, I will connect less to the excitement and the positive language. I'll connect more. Oh wow, 1 million people rated this with 8 stars, right? And that's just one thing. We had many more, but usually, some of them we could explain like this because it's very sort of intuitive explanation and it's understandable why. Some of them were more complex, but we did discover, what you need to remember probably, we did discover differences with respect to personality because, we all speak personalization language and we all know things need to be personalized. So that's yet another example of that. Personality is part of this personalization. And we also discovered some differences with respect to cultures. And here we run it, that was probably what you asked, Mehdi. We run it in 4 countries with 4 local cohorts of participants. And the easy answer, those 2 that were dominant, remember in the overall slide, we said they prefer quality recommendations. This one holds everywhere. It's not highlighted visually, but you can see in bold, quality is still preferred in all 4 countries. Presentation, genre grouping is still preferred in all 4 countries. Easy. Whatever was dominant in the big cohort is also dominant in country-specific cohorts. But in the middle with the explanation, we have even more mess. So if there was no clear winner then not only we still don't have a clear winner, but persuasive, in fact, in 3 countries, persuasive explanations are preferred overall, right? I'm looking at the overall, yeah. And for example, in the US group, it's like all over the shop. As you can see, they prefer different things, they trust different things. By the way, potentially, we never check this, but potentially I would look at the homogeneity of those cohorts. Like French-speaking recruitment by IP address only in France, potentially they're French subjects culturally, like ethnically French. Japan, again, studying Japanese recruitment through the Japanese, the Japanese Mechanical Turk, whatever it's called, the name escapes me. In the Japanese language, yes, we are likely to have only the Japanese participants. Russian, translated into Russian language, Russian IPs, yeah, mainly Russian subjects. US, it's not a homogeneous. There is no this ethos called American, right? Because everybody lives like, I don't know how many different nations live in the US, but obviously hundreds. So, and that probably explains the lowest stability of these results. We couldn't validate this. We never tried, in fact, to validate this. So And then we even connected these. There is a big social study which tries to characterize cultures, nations, with respect to 6 dimensions, which I had in one of the previous slides. And then, for example, there is a dimension that's called masculinity. It's a bad name, but the 2 extreme sides of this dimension are like, strive to achievement, heroism, assertiveness, material rewards. And then on the other side, you have cooperation, modesty, caring for the weak. So kind of, let's take it outside the cultures, socialism and capitalism. It's probably closer analogies. And when you look at how different countries score with respect to this dimension, you can, for example, see that France scores 43, pretty low. Japan scores 95, pretty high. And then we could explain some of those differences we observe by the score. Again, it's a very, very high level generalization, because we cannot say that all the French people are 43 for this masculinity. Obviously, some are lower, some are higher, but in general, there are trends because we have 100 plus people from this culture. And if we observe differences, some of these differences indeed may be attributed to this. Again, much more on this in the paper. And time is running out. And sorry, questions here on personality and cultural differences? Yeah.
I want to go back to the previous slides.
Yes, of course.
So basically participant choose the preference among one of the 3.
Yes.
But then how do you differentiate the other 2, whether they least favorite or like the second favorite one?
So for example, in this cohort, just looking at this one as an example, when we showed 3 different interfaces, 3 different presentations, and asked which one of these 3 you prefer, genre grouping was selected 80 times, star was selected 31 times, human was selected 5 times.
But does only one person select one of the 3?
With repetitions.
But then how do you like compare the second favorite or the least favorite one?
Yeah, we don't know. Out of every selection, we don't know. We basically know that A is better than B and A is better than C. We don't know what happens between B and C. Yeah. But overall counts, by the way, we are back to this point. Look how bad human is. Like seriously bad. Okay. And that's why we conducted the 3rd study, where we actually looked at the acceptance of recommendations with a proponent, with a human proponent, like real friend, or expert is this TV personality, or just a robot, AI, essentially. So, and this is the uptake of recommendations. So you can see, sort of out of the recommendations with this proponent, how many got accepted, how many got followed, how many items were added to the cart. So with the friend recommendation, it's 27%. With the expert recommendation, it's 20%. With the robot recommendation, it's about 20%. And without any sort of proponent, 17%. So this was statistically better than these 2 that were comparable and than this one, right? You can see by the numbers, like 27, 20, 25, 20, 20, and 17. And then the more interesting bit is actually we try to understand when those proponents are helpful. And we looked, and kind of the only differences. So, for example, if we look at recommendations that are, essentially we asked users, do you think you will like this item? We recommend you the item. They say, yeah, I'll add this item to my cart. I'll watch this movie. And then we ask this question, do you think you will like this movie? Assuming that you haven't watched it, right? We ask 2 questions, in fact. Have you watched the movie? And do you think, if not, do you think you will like this movie? And we filtered out those movies that they already watched because they know them, they have an opinion. That's not a question here. But if they have not watched the movie, that's when we said, oh, do you think you will watch, do you think you will like this movie? And this is what we analyzed. So if they said, yes, I think I like this movie, and we look at accepted recommendations with proponent and without proponent, the acceptance rate was comparable. At least there was no significant difference with these numbers. If we recruited 10 times more subjects, maybe the difference would be significant, but not in this case. If they said, no, I'm not going to like this movie, like I accept this recommendation, but I don't think I like this movie, you see that the acceptance rate was minuscule, 1% acceptance. I don't know why they added this item to the card, but they did add it. And there is no difference between these 2, 1.2, 1.4. But if they don't know if they like the movie or not, and we have a proponent, this difference is significant. So in essence, if they think that they like it, sure, they like it, right? And then it doesn't matter if we add the proponent or not. If they think they will dislike it, again, they're so strongly opinionated, they think they will not like the movie, the difference is not significant. But if they are not sure, if they cannot decide in this column, that's when the proponent kicks in. And that's when the proponent has a role to play. Okay? Questions before we jump into the discussion? 10 minutes. Cool. So to sum it up, let's go into the discussion and then we'll have more time to talk. If we look at the three dimensions within the prioritization dimension, accuracy is a clear winner. Sort of accurate recommendations, good recommendations, quality recommendations are trusted more than any other things that can be trusted. If we look at the presentation, somewhat surprisingly, because this one I didn't expect, in fact, organized interface, organization-based interface is the most trusted way to present. So, oh yeah, sorry, and design implications, of course, because design implications come here in italic. So, with the accuracy is the most trusted prioritization. That's what we saw in the study. What does it mean? In short, it means that 30 years of Rexis research into MAE are for a reason. Because accuracy is important, right? They trust accuracy more. If you ship bad recommendations, they'll not follow it.
You mentioned quality. How do you measure quality?
That was the average rating on IMDb in this case. But in general, all the studies try, if you look at the classical work on recommenders, trying to improve the accuracy, MAE, RMSE, all those things, that's about the quality of recommendations. It's like try to predict the star rating as accurately as possible, and then push items with the high predicted score. It is for a reason, right? Because if you compromise on this, do not compromise on the accuracy, reliability of recommendations. Because if you compromise on this, no matter how the presentation looks like, no matter how the explanations look like, the trust goes down, they're unlikely to follow this recommendation. So that's kind of, in a sense, design implication, right? With the organization-based interface, that was the most liked, the most trusted interface. What do we take out of this? If you have recommended items, try to group them, try to cluster them in some shape or form. Don't just throw at me a list of 10 recommendations. Try to somehow make sense of them and show them in a more organized way. Again, as a design implication, how to present the recommendation. So these two, we had a clear winner, and then there is a clear design implication. And then for the explanation, interestingly enough, we did not have a winner. So we did not have a single mode of explanation that outperformed all the rest, which basically means pick explanation that play to what you want to achieve with your recommender. And here are two examples. If your recommender is about recommending papers, like you all write a paper, you need to write a literature review section. There are thousands of papers out on a topic, if the topic is broad enough. And if you want to craft a quality related work section, you will need to go through 1,000 papers and then see what's more relevant, what's less relevant, what needs to be cited, what not. You can think of a recommender that would be recommending papers. If you want to recommend papers, you probably want the factual explanations to be prioritized, because factual explanations play to the competence of the recommender. So you want to perceive recommender. It's about recommending papers. You want to perceive this recommender as something that understands the domain, that understands those papers, that knows which papers are more important, which papers are less important, and that's the factual explanation. On the other hand, if you have a food recommender, which is more of a hedonic nature, then kind of hedonic is in my interest, right? I want to see food, I want to be recommended food that I will like personally, then it's the benevolence dimension of those recommenders. And for the benevolence, you'd prefer personalized explanation. So I'm nearly reverse engineering here the nature of the recommender and trying to understand what aspect of trust, what construct of trust will be more important for this particular recommender, and then going back to explanations and checking which explanation, what type of explanations instills more trust for this particular construct. So here, no clear winner and no clear design guidelines. Then going forward, we detected dependencies in personality and cultural dimension. And again, this is good news for personalization research, because we have been doing this stuff for a long, long time. And here we see yet another thing. Even trust in recommenders depends on the recipient of the recommendations, depends on their culture, depends on their personality, depends on many, many things. And finally, those human agents representing real life contacts boosted trust, boosted the uptake of recommendations, which again is good news because that's kind of, we now rebuild the trust in the social nature of recommendations. I said half an hour ago, it failed miserably, it failed spectacularly. Now we understand why, because if you pick a random face and attach it to the recommendations, it's not good. But if you attach a real friend, yeah, I know this guy, I know he understands movies, I know he's a movie sort of expert, or I know he likes the same movies that I like, I'll trust this person more than just a random person, than just a TV personality. So emphasize the social nature of recommendations. And finally, yes, human agents affected most the uptake of borderline recommendations, where they were not sure if it's a good recommendation or bad. And that's potentially the space that requires most attention, right? Whatever they like, they'll consume, they'll take it. Whatever they dislike, they'll reject, they'll not take it. But if you look at the knee, where they're not sure, that's exactly where you want to put more energy, more resources, more explanation, whatever you like. That's the borderline, right? They're on the fence, and you want to drag them on this side of the fence rather than let them fall on the other side of the fence. Okay? So I think we stop here. There are lots of topics for discussion. Each one of them is like good 10-minute discussion. I think I'll stop here, and I'll let you sort of ask questions. I think that was the last one, right? Yeah, perfect. That's the last time. Questions, please. Thank you.
No, actually, comment. I was reading a book on psychology, especially psychology, and then there was an interesting experiment that was described there. It was probably 1970s time, like early modern psychology, and one of the interesting experiments was people randomly kind of picked from the street, or volunteers randomly picked, been asked to basically connect, this medical devices to the people that basically were actors or actresses, and to increase the voltage, basically kind of, oh, you're helping this guy because the heart is not beating or something.
Yeah.
But at some point, they realized that the person is basically being hurt or something, like kind of mini torture thing.
Yeah.
And the experiment was, there were two groups. One group was basically like an empty room and this experiment running, and the other one, there was a presence of authority, like a person in the suit of a medical doctor or a police. And it turns out that when this authority is there, people basically just increase the voltage to the maximum, regardless of, So it seems to me that the presence of this random person, as you said, didn't basically contribute at all. But if it was some expert
with a suit,
I don't know, some form of oh, I know the movies, or like editors pick or something, even if it's not a friend, it might be that it would positively contribute to the how to say, satisfaction of the metric.
I agree. I completely agree. I mean, that's about the question. I agree. And another comment, high level comment. I really appreciate psychology papers for two reasons. First, they're usually great statisticians, and like they'll do crazy analysis that we as computer scientists don't do. They just understand stats much better than we do, despite the fact that they're psychology and apparently it's further away. And the second one, which is back to your comment, it's for the creativity of their experimental design. Sort of putting people in suits next to whatever, we just don't do those things. Like they do absolutely crazy experimental designs in a good sense, the good crazy sort of. Anyway, I won't go there, but yes, they have amazing, mind-blowing experiments that they stage. You've probably heard of that. Probably the most famous one is the 1960s experiment in Stanford, I think, with the kind of people got more cruel because they played the role of you know what I mean, right? Since then, we are doing ethics applications. Since
the Milgram experiments,
I think was it the Milgram?
Similar to the experiment what you described, but there was a person, an observer, and people were interested in finding out why during Nazi Germany people were able to kill
Yeah.
so many people in the gas chamber, and it turned out that the observer played a crucial role in that concept. So people were actually increasing the voltage, when this supervisor observer and relationship, and he actually played it full, and actually a lot of people were able to kill people, not really killing them, but just because simulating it, because the observer, because the supervisor, sorry, the supervisor told the observer or the operator just to increase it.
Something like
So
this.
people and the difference was that in one condition they could see the participant in the room, and in the other condition not. So and then based on that, they had the conclusion that abstraction is very bad for people. So it makes a difference whether you see the person that you harm or you don't see the person that you harm. And based on that, they started with ethics and all those things.
Exactly. I can again, anecdotal story. Like that's how we run experiment to measure trust. We show them 3 lists and we kind of pick which one you trust most. I saw an experiment into trust done by psychologists where the name escapes me. There is this ancient computer game where you have like a little pedal that you move right and left, and you need to bounce the ball. So they play. What's the name of this game? Does anyone remember?
Is it pinball or something? Like
It's not pinball. It's sort of similar concept. Yeah, that you just control that pedal to go. Atari time. So how psychologists run experiment into trust? They've created a game where there are 2 pedals at the same time. One is controlled by the subject, the other one is controlled by AI. And they kind of say, you know what, you look after the right side of the screen, AI will look after the left side of the screen, and the AI gets imperfect, starts losing balls, starts dropping balls, and then the user ventures more and more into the AI side, and that's how they measure trust. Because if I'm the subject and I don't trust that AI because it's dropping balls, I will start pushing my pedal into their territory because I don't trust them. Such a neat way to measure trust. Much cooler than this rubbish. So they do absolutely crazy experimental design. Sometimes I just look at them and like, whoa, who on earth thought about this experimental design? Sorry, we diverged. More questions?
This is not completely related, but somehow related. I saw that you were using IMDb for
Maybe.
and that is a lot of humans trusting humans. But now that we have bots where like a bot can go and rate something super hard or something, how do you see the impact of that, like bots and trust?
Great question. First of all this was done pre LLMs and ChatGPT. We had this simplified dimension of kind of recommender, AI recommending movies, but it's obviously nowhere near the current levels of complexity. So I'll be very cautious to comment on this, really. I believe that trust in ChatGPT evolves, forms as we speak. It would change with every new version of ChatGPT released with its own success stories or its own failures. It's a very super dynamic these days because kind of the technology is not mature enough, right? Recommenders are out for 30 years, and by now I wouldn't use the word perfected, but it won't be pushing real rubbish to you. Some are better, some are worse, but kind of it's reasonably stable, reasonably reliable, because people see it at every website, starting from LinkedIn, Facebook, eBay, Amazon. Like every website will have a recommender plugged in these days. I'm sure your news recommenders are plugged into your industry partners. So like people are used to this. I think this translates into trust. I wouldn't be sure at all how to comment on trust in new technologies like ChatGPT, for example. So I'd be very cautious, and I would say it's probably evolving. Probably these studies will start popping up soon because it's getting more and more acceptable. But I better keep quiet. You had a question. Yeah.
Yes, my question I think related to the final one, but I think the trust is important.
Yeah.
But too much traffic is dangerous.
Absolutely.
So is it possible to control the adequate level of the trust
Yes.
between the machine and the humans?
Yes. Is it about the last comment here?
Similar to the last one.
Similar. Okay. So the last one, let me just see, since we're getting into the discussion.
But
I mean, the last point here refers to a slightly different thing, because if a recommender is deployed by Amazon, is it recommending best items for me, or is it trying to upsell the previous version of iPhone because the next one is coming out next week, right? Because we have the personalization and kind of the system should be benevolence, the system should be acting in my interest, but at the same time, it's also recommended that's deployed on a website that it's a company, it's about to making money, and then it will be different. So kind of the last comment here is about trust versus deception, essentially versus not telling the entire truth, and commercial goals of the recommender. Now, keeping trust now, and then that's the last point here. Now, back to your question, I think trust is also not a static thing. And we had another line of work, which I didn't mention at all here. What happens when the system goes wrong? And the one line summary of that line of work is trust is easy to lose. Trust is hard to build. That is, and it's very much similar to human trust, right? If somebody lies to you once or twice, your trust goes down. And again, this person will need to prove themselves for a long period of time before you rebuild the trust. And it's exactly the same with recommender systems and with AI technologies, right? If AI technology, back to your question, right? If AI misbehaves, if ChatGPT hallucinates a few times, I may stop using it. Or I may start checking everything that I get out of ChatGPT, checking manually, right? But if the system, and this is very quick, right? Once you pick one or two hallucinations, your trust is likely to fall, dramatically fall. And then if ChatGPT wants to rebuild it, it will take a long, reliable interaction to step by step, slowly rebuild this trust. So that's what we found in another line of work. So, which basically says, like, yes, if you're confident that your service, your AI decision support, your recommendation are good, probably that's okay. But if you are unsure, you need to be very, very cautious not to fall, not to err. Because if you err, the trust falls immediately and it will take you. So kind of, think twice about something that you are not confident about, you as the system. Because if incidentally you go wrong, that's a damage. That's a serious damage, okay? And this trust needs to be calibrated very carefully, again, not to get into the situation where where the system loses trust by incidental or, deliberate, the last point, wrong suggestion, right? I suppose if a user learns that they were recommended an iPhone and they bought an iPhone and next week they see a new version, I suppose they'll be very unhappy, right? Because they say, oh, I could have waited for a week and buy the next version, right? So it's a very sort of gray area, especially when we have commercial goals in play. And I believe it's very, again, as users, putting myself as a user, we don't see it. We don't know why the item is recommended. But yeah, I hope I answered the question. It was, yeah, Eddie.
There might also be some form of correlation in the application domain of the recommended system and the level of trust needed.
Absolutely.
So in this case, like movie, I always joke like, look, if we are making a recommended system and we screw up, what happens? A bunch of bad movies are recommended to someone. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But for instance, in a new domain, it might be irrelevant or even misinformation is recommended as the news, or even health domain that you also this gets even further, like wrong medicine is recommended. And so my impression is if this type of experiment, which is very interesting, that has been done in media domain, which is our domain, but is replicated, for instance, in medical domain, it can be different because of the cost,
Absolutely. Yeah. That's, again, yet another stream of work that we do. There are no recommendations in medicine. Full stop. No, they don't exist. Why? because a bad recommendation can, we talked about this an hour ago. Imagine underdiagnosing cancer, right? If you overdiagnose cancer, somebody takes a treatment that they're not supposed to take. It's not good for their health, yada, yada, yada. If we have a cancer patient with a false negative, you can imagine the consequences, right? And we send this person home by saying, yeah, you're right, have a rest at home and you'll be okay. And then they come back 3 months later with an advanced stage of cancer. That's horrible. That's absolutely horrible. So kind of, you don't see recommenders in medicine. You don't see recommenders in nuclear plants for exactly the same reason. Kind of that's where you leave the human in control, because there is so much at risk that you still leave the human in control. For movies, for small things, yeah, there is recommend, but yeah, completely, yeah. So there is a lot there. I'm not sure, for example, if there is a recommender for even decisions like buying a home or buying an expensive car. I'm not talking about, second-hand car for $3,000, but sort of as the risk and the cost goes up, I think the popularity of the recommenders for this domain goes down because the mistakes are very costly, be it in terms of money, be it in terms of poor diagnosis. So, and with this comes the trust, right? Because if it's a very important decision that will cost me $100,000, I'll probably check it manually. And if I'm checking it manually, like, do I really need this recommender? Maybe not, right? So. Any more questions? We're running out of time, right? Yeah. Oh, we've got Dietmar. Hey, Dietmar. Good to see you, even though online.
Good to see you. Hello.
If there's no additional question, Shlomo, you can have a last word. If you do not want to have a last word.
No, thank you for your attention. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Cheers.